Roger, 0J, and I feel fine.
Discovery Houston, press to ATO.
Liftoff of mission 41D, the first flight in the orbit of Discovery, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Three, two, one, zero, zero.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Hello, hello. And welcome to another Daily Plan. I'm your boss, Joe Boss. We got some chop today. No risk off continuation for everyone who's been going long. Oh. And it was so sweet to actually see the dollar weakness come through. But as I promised from yesterday's stream, I was reading up on some outlooks here midweek. And a lot of the institutions are still dollar bullish, and then to see this come through on today, I'm like, chop is hell, man. Chop is hell. And even though for a lot of people who are new to charts or new to trading, they'll go ahead and look at this. Well, guess what? If you were trading here or here or here, anytime in this area here in like between the last 24 to 48 hours, even if you were, short up here, essentially risk on short against the dollar, you're kind of holding on to your pants right now. So we're just gonna take a look at things and see where we are on the yield spreads for some of these dollar pairs here, because right now the yield spreads are kind of king as far as the analysis goes. And it looks like here on the 12-hour The major threat seems to be the long-term yield spread. Short-term things seem to be improving over the last week. So really what we need is this week to still have some more positive drift, at least on New Zealand here. Let's go to a daily chart real quick, see how that's turned up. It needs a lot more improvement till it sees more upside. However, again, going into next month, things are looking a bit better. However, you can see like low percentages here throughout April. Most of your odds are clustered up here. Again, on next month ahead and week ahead stream for this Friday. So definitely tune in on the Friday stream. We'll be going over month ahead and week ahead expectations. And that'll be interesting to see what, because these thin bearish odds, yeah, I mean, you can look over here for this current month. It seems like we'll probably end up closing around here, or hopefully you get the spike up into here. Very low odds in this area still. So it seems like closing at the 60 cent or just below the 60 cent, like 40 pips below the 60 cent mark here, look plausible. Let's go ahead and check out the pound. That looks really bad. That looks worse than New Zealand. There's been a lot of focus. Actually, I'm going to switch the chart again to Euro Pound. A lot of people are still long the Euro Pound and setting even higher targets, like above the 86 mark, essentially above this high. We can go ahead and check out maybe some of the high odds for this week. A lot of your closes are in this area up here still, essentially still sideways. But there has been no movement. Look how flat that has been. You want to talk chop. I mean, you want to talk chop. That is chop, man. That is super chop. Oh, man. Yeah, maybe a bit more upside into around here. Maybe a bit more downside into around here. If this does move, I don't see too much movement into the end of this week. Maybe next week. Next week probably has a bit more hope. It seems, yeah, you got a shot at some more bullishness, but considering how little the movement has been on this particular cross, the pivots for next week are very compressed, which makes it actually quite easy to go above the R1 and below the S1 pivots. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one here. I don't want to skip. Okay, let's look at Euro dollar. Euro dollar here on the yield spreads also look pretty darn negative. I mean, they were negative going into this up move, but now it's kind of straightforward, like, okay, that's a considerable red candle. I don't necessarily know if the drift is going to end up effectively looking like this into the close, just more chop sideways into this close. We're going to be watching the economic events that are coming up here. Let's see, any more major news? Dollar up, yen edges lower. Speaking of, here's the dollar yen. And the dollar yen still looks like, yeah, this looks like it's going to go higher. This still looks like it's going to go higher. The risk off expectations I had going into the first couple of days here of the week, this expectation just across the board on these dollar pairs have not been met. And it still looks either choppy or risk off. It doesn't necessarily look risk on quite yet at the moment. Don't get me wrong here. While I say there's chop and some risk off going on, that's kind of a loosely held footing by a lot of the outlooks and a lot of these odds that I'm bringing up. And the reason for that is because going into like the first, maybe the second week of April, things are still looking pretty risk on. Generally, month of April is also pretty good. It's just once we get into the CPI for next month, and I'm gonna hammer this home pretty much every stream until we get to the CPI. Energy prices are still going higher. Home prices are not falling as fast as we would like for it to actually help impact the CPI. So while they might fall a teensy bit, not too much that can come out of CPI on that front. It actually looks like CPI next month might accelerate, which is risk off. But understand CPI is like 2 to 3 weeks from now. There's also been some commentary recently about the Fed. So if I go back here to the DXY, there's been some commentary recently about the Fed focusing more on the change in unemployment, where if the Fed sees unemployment rise faster, they might want to cut in May. So depending on how the next two unemployment reports come out, if there's a particularly high acceleration there, even if inflation is still a little elevated, there's now speculation about a cut, which, it's like, well, are you going to focus still on inflation and hold things steady because the Fed has a dual mandate? So if the employment situation is getting worse and the inflation situation is getting worse, which one is the Fed going to prioritize? That's a particularly dicey scenario there. So we'll have to wait and see on some more analysis to break down that view. And on this Aussie trade, I did hop out around here in like the middle 2/3 area here of my stop. But man, did I place that stop well or what? If I had actually held on to that. I got out, it was like 15-ish pips of loss. All right, better than potentially 25. All good. But then the thing immediately reversed today, and it's Chop City, man. Chop City. Yeah. Again, I would still like this thing to go up here, but for all I know, one of the reasons why we're not going to be going up here is because the volatility from this prior period has just made this period's pivots very expanded. If I hide the drawings real quick so you can clearly see, you can see all these pivots from the prior period, right? R5, S5, right? When you have a set of expanded pivots, that just means this set of pivots encompasses a wider range than this set of pivots. And that's usually due to volatility from the prior period expanding the current period's set of pivots, which then expands the range of all these targets. So the only way you end up usually hitting these expectations, right, is on the volatility from this period continuing, or at least holding flat. And so far, the volatility on a lot of these assets has been a lot lower. And going into this week, we were expecting it to be a quieter week, don't get me wrong. But I wasn't expecting it to be this quiet and effectively choppy. As far as the yield spreads go, the Aussie really is not holding up even as well as New Zealand. On the day, it's still doing okay, but it's not positive. These yield spreads are really not holding up well. Next month, though, you can see a lot of highs up here, We hit the probability weighted pivot high for this month. Maybe we'll hit it again next month, but let's go ahead and check out our low odds. Yeah, maybe some more negative drift into here. We go down and up. That'll be an interesting plan that we set on Friday. Let's go ahead and check out the Canadian dollar just had its spike and it's retreating again. Still more positive yield spread. So on this pair, because it's dollar CAD, it's reversed. It's not like Aussie dollar. So on Aussie dollar, red would mean strong for the dollar. Here, green means strong for the dollar. And it's not looking so hot for the Canadian anyways economically. Their growth isn't fantastic. Their taxes are horrible. Everyone who I talk to in Canada is, I mean, just talk to Mark Meldrum about it for a moment or two. Mark Meldrum will give you his rant or two. Or you talk to the leader of the opposition in Canada, and I actually follow his YouTube channel, and the guy's been gaining more popularity. And man, you can only hope Trudeau actually gets kicked out at some point here, because he is pretty darn unpopular with his taxes, because people are getting like double and quadruple taxed on the carbon tax. You know, you go to raise cattle, you need to put a carbon tax on the cattle. You then slaughter the cattle and send it to the slaughterhouse. You need a carbon tax on the slaughterhouse. You then package the meat. You need another carbon tax. You then go to the store to finally buy the meat or the milk or the eggs or whatever. And by the time it gets to the consumer, it's been taxed multiple times. And this also goes for like wood furnishing. You need carbon tax for all the for oil and gas. You need carbon tax for all the lumber, and then all the transportation gets carbon tax. So you're getting taxed at every iterative process. So imagine a worse VAT tax. Like in Europe, you know how you have VAT where you're just taxed on the value added to the product. Well, in Canada, the carbon tax is like adding a whole extra full VAT. It's not incremental to the value added. It's incremental to, oh, how much did you quote unquote pollute? And there's constant challenges to how those are being measured, how those pollution measures are being measured. So it's just a big mess right now economically in Canada. It's not like they have a great housing scenario either. They actually have a less housing and less houses under construction than the US, even though they have so much more land. No, I have family in Canada, so I'm like very into this. I have a lot of friends in Canada, so yeah, man, it's tough. And we finally got a somewhat bigger red day on cocoa. This is the biggest red day since all the way back here in the beginning of March. Whoop-de-doo. Looks like March has been a phenomenal gain here on cocoa. Oh man. Yeah, the price of chocolate just everywhere is going insane. Insane in the main brand. Let's go ahead and check out oil. Oil also reversed its nice move here. I said on this day here when we were streaming, hey, remember, a lot of people are still targeting 85. As far as oil goes, I think this is definitely going to be more choppy and less of a trend. A lot of guys who do TA are going to see this high and say, hey, lower high. And I look at it a bit differently. I kind of ignore this high over here, and I look right here and I say, hey, your high for any given week on oil is usually here or here. So right here is where you get a lot of your more bearish highs right off the open. And right here would be where you get more of your range bound highs, or if you went down then up, this would be your bullish high. So this area here, you do find a lot of highs. So that makes sense to me. And that's why we drew this little green line here saying, hey, most of the time the top is somewhere around here this week. You can even see we set an expectation last Friday for our top to be in this spot here. We just expected a down move first, a risk off move first during the first 24, 48 hours of the week. We've missed on those expectations kind of across the board here. It's been risk on. And so instead, we've been hitting some of these targets. So that's kind of where the title of the stream comes in. We've been, I'd say we probably hit the high here on oil, at least for this week. I'd expect maybe some slight negative drift, sideways action here. And we can actually look at the closing odds here. So instead of looking at where the likely low or likely high usually are for any given week here on oil, we can look at where we're most likely to close. And if I go ahead and I delete these two little drawings here, you can see this blue area here just highlights where you have the greatest odds of finding your close. Now this is just probability density, so this is usually where you find most of your closes for a given week. Let's go ahead and check out the seasonal data. Oh, and the seasonal data lines, at least on the high side, right? A lot of your highs are, I mean, that's close to 50% of your highs are right here in this area here for the week. So I'd say it's probably a pretty straightforward call to say the high is likely in for the week here on oil. It's hard to say exactly where the low is going to end up being. I mean, I do think this expectation could still get met on some, I don't know, maybe Venezuela comes out and says, oh, we're going to be producing more oil in order to kind of cover their butts on the geopolitical front, because I think they just silenced a large portion of their opposition recently. Oh man, Venezuela, not a great place. Not a great place. All right, let's check the closing odds here. Are they mostly around here, sideways? Yeah. Oh, I remember. This is kind of a bipolar look. You have a lot of closes up here, some closes here, and some closes here. So this is like, hey, if you're going sideways, you really want more lower volatility to come in. You want the volatility to decrease faster going in here. If the volatility starts increasing, I might lean towards getting the close around essentially the $80 mark. So I have a bit more. I mean, this would be technically risk on. This would be good for energy. I do know that Biden has been slightly rebuilding the petroleum reserves in the United States, but that's after he's essentially dumped a huge amount. And there's speculation that he's only giving some token money to rebuild the oil reserve so then he can effectively sell almost all of his token rebuilds over probably the next 4 or 5 months to then rapidly sell oil going into the election. That's some speculation. So then he can try and tamper those energy prices. Not naturally, of course, not through market forces of supply and demand, but through the printing of the US dollar printer. Your tax dollars going into pushing oil lower to help Biden's election odds. Again, it's just a theory. Don't get me wrong, but it can be used like that. It has been used like that before, and it's more or less a matter of fiscal policy on that end. And it's not like they've openly come out and said, here's our policy on the SPR, right? We really can only speculate because they're kind of staying silent on what their policy is with this. Let's go ahead and check out gold. Gold holding on to most of its gains. It's doing pretty all right. Let's go ahead and check out the high odds. It has moved past this spot here. Let's go ahead and check out the ranges on the high end. See if this is a likely top as well. Yeah, you really would need a higher high, and then it becomes a guessing game as to where the high for this week is going to come in. But nominally, I would say the high is coming in around here most of the time. And this was definitely on the edge of that range for sure. So some people probably got freaked out over here at like the tippity tip top of that bar. Or some people saw really good value and then came in and created this red bar. Let's look at our closing odds here. Go ahead and update this to close. So right off the bat, most of the closes for any given week are around here. You can see right here, this is where we have most of our largest odds for closing this week. So it seems like we'd get some negative sideways-ish drift here on gold into the end of the week. And seasonally too, that seems to be the case. Kind of leaning also towards a little bit more negative drift. Let's go ahead. I mean, we can check out Nat Gas. Wow, Nat Gas had quite a jump up. This thing moved 10%. 10%. Wow. That is a nutty move. I'll have to follow up on this maybe tomorrow and read what happened. Let's see here. Nat gas price sinks on abundant supplies. Settle in volatile April expiry. Yeah, this news seems just a tad old. All right, let's go on to crypto. Crypto is holding up here. It does look like it's at the edge of the highs. Any higher and you're getting crazy exponential moves. We're still holding 70K from yesterday, which is nice to see, but most of the time well, 75% of the time your top for the week comes in below here. This little line right here that says 75, so 75% of the time. The high for any given week on Bitcoin is below here. So I would maybe be a bit cautious on any more longs. But then again, this is crypto. It does have a logarithmic supply, which turns into, when you flip it around, an exponential demand. So you go ahead and add some deflationary currency into that, and you have this constant upside pressure to create like an infinitely valued money. So this price here is tentative on what the supply currently looks like for Bitcoin at the moment. Look, if more people start becoming unemployed and some of those people have a little bit of Bitcoin in their reserves, one way to save your butt is actually to sell a bit of Bitcoin. But guess what? There's all these ETFs that are buying huge amounts. I mean, the BlackRock ETF, I think, has overtaken MicroStrategy, if I'm not mistaken, as far as the amount of Bitcoin held. So there's still a lot of demand for Bitcoin coming from those ETFs that's helping support the prices here. Then again, MicroStrategy is selling off quite a bit of Bitcoin. That's kind of what all these dumps have been about. So we'll see if Bitcoin follows through on this nominal expectation of a bit more negative drift into the close, or if it goes up and away into the tail here. And of course, anyone long Bitcoin over here during the last week or two who bought at these lows is probably weighing their choices right now. Ethereum, it's effectively in the same place. Litecoin though is kind of the holdout here. This thing did 5% today. CFTC reiterates Ether is a commodity in complaint against KuCoin. Well, that's not a Litecoin news thing, but that's an Ethereum news thing. Oh, uh-oh. CFTC says Ethereum and Litecoin are commodities in new lawsuit. Uh-oh. That is really bad for Ethereum and Litecoin because it means they probably won't get their ETFs. That is not good. And did this happen like in the last few hours? Yeah, this happened like way over here, going apparently into the CFTC reports, which we just got in the last couple of hours here. So I wonder what the spike was about, because that is really not good news. It'd be interesting to follow a couple of lawyers who specialize in the crypto space to see what kind of legs the CFTC is standing on, because I know they've kind of screwed up their case against Ethereum, but they haven't really done much on Litecoin, and maybe they're going to use. I mean, I don't think Litecoin is a commodity. It started at the same time as Bitcoin, and they haven't done the same kind of shenanigans on their blockchain, as far as I can recall. As far as stuff like reversing some transactions or hard forking to reverse some transactions. So we'll see. We'll see. It'll be definitely something to follow up on here on the Litecoin side. But that is definitely interesting. It is at a likely high for the week, but on crypto, that, the thing can easily go into these tails. I'll go ahead and send an alert here for, let's say, 101. And past this, I'd expect it just to be a guess as to where the high is going to be for the week. But nominally, I would be expecting the high to be around here in this $100 to $95 range this week. All right. Anything else that I should cover? Probably the S&P, which also had mega chop. There was some relief coming in here in the last 12 hours, and now here today, it's just totally chopped, totally reversed the trend, made a new low. Not looking good. I was actually kind of hopeful that today would be a green day instead of a choppy day, and we would end up hitting this spot up here, hit a new high, slight pullback, and then continue up into the first week of April. But no cigar. This chomp is just hurting a lot of guys here. And you can see the NASDAQ has just been sideways. The volatility has been slightly increasing. This volatility was definitely higher than this short period here. But yeah, this is Chop City. You could go ahead and say the low is probably in on the NQ. But first, let's look at the low odds here. Yeah, it still seems, again, over the last 24 years for this particular week of the year, 45% of the time the low is around here between S0.5 and S1. So I'd be cautious about any more longs myself at this spot, considering the chop and low volatility recently. Because if this red bar follows through, tapping this spot, I think, would be fairly likely. And then maybe some positive drift into the close. And we can go ahead and check that out. Yeah, so reaching down here and then reversing that move might be on the cards. Then if we look at the closing odds seasonally, maybe something along the lines of down to here and then just a bit of a drift up into here. So there's kind of two scenarios there, one for a particularly nice rebound, one for something more muted. And then again, you have these fairly thin odds of closing down here on any particularly bad news. I think we are getting a few earnings this week, if I'm not mistaken. I think GameStop was reporting this week. Let's go ahead and check out GME. Wow, check that out. GameStop up 15%, but it looks like it's been having a few 15% moves for like the last month, and it's been insane chop before that. Then again, this has not been a fun ride at all for people. This looks like a shit coin. This looks like an altcoin. Again, meme stocks, man. Meme stocks. What are you going to do? But just degenerate gamble on them, essentially. I did hear some stuff about ARK. Yeah, ARK is just in Chop City. How about Nvidia? Nvidia's down 2.5%. It did get hit quite a bit. Not the greatest of odds here. Probably more sideways action, if I were to say. Let's see here. Anything else? Apple seems like it's holding up. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still falling and heading to these lows, but this is quite a downturn here on Apple. Took the elevator up and the escalator down in a super choppy fashion. Yeah, look at these big fat gaps it's put in during that time. Absolutely nutty. Okay. Also, I want to check out Aussie. Yeah. Oh, actually, the yield spreads are flipping on this one. The yield spreads are flipping on the cross for Aussie New Zealand. Yeah, it might be topping out now around here. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at this. So I'll go ahead and actually set a slightly bearish expectation into the close. Yep, today's 26th. So I'll go with this expectation here. Just based on the yield spreads. We can also check out our high odds, which actually you do get most of your highs for this week. Either somewhere here or here. You got a lot of highs up here too. But you would need another higher high past this point around here to start a continuation move up. But right now, these yield spreads are not that supportive. They're definitely not as supportive in this whole range here. You can see a bit of red comes in, you get a dip, and then on the dip, the yield spreads flip green. Yeah. The yield spreads are not looking fantastic at the moment for this trend to continue. Actually, I've really liked yield spreads as a way to follow trends more closely, at least on the FX side of things, more so than momentum indicators themselves. So with this in mind, yeah, maybe something along that line. Yeah. So a lot of your closes for this particular cross are around here or around here. So on a particularly harsh move against the Aussie, going down there would, I think, be the next most likely close. But that's given any particular week. And if we look at this, yeah, that's in the cards, but it's quite far off. You actually, I think, have better chances of hitting that next week. Next week looks like it either wants to close just above the central pivot or you're guessing as to where it's closing down there. So not the best outlook going forward here on Aussie New Zealand. Seems like the rotation might be preparing itself here. So I'll keep an outlook maybe on some of the Westpac stuff that I read for what the views are on Aussie New Zealand going forward. Okay, I think that was actually a pretty good show. We covered a lot, got some decent commentary in, and the show's under an hour so far. All right, I should be back, but I'm not quite sure what caused that. All right, we're good. There's just now a 12-second delay here on the stream. Sorry about that. All right, so yep, I'm gonna end the stream here. If anybody wants to hang out in the trading group, go ahead and hop in. I'll be in there for 30-ish minutes to an hour today. And I'll see you guys in a bit.